I'm so sorry. Thank you. Half an hour would be wonderful.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
All right. Well, let me just say that I am with Child Protection League, which is an organization, nonprofit out of Minnesota, and we have been working since 2013 on protecting children from indoctrination, exploitation, and violence. And so we cover a lot of different subjects. We do get into comprehensive sex ed and the LGBT, but I'm not going to be focusing too much on that today. I just wanted to tell you that when we're dealing with critical race theory, equity, and social emotional learning, which is what I titled this, I want to show you a graphic. Social emotional learning is a complete system of learning. It isn't a program. It's a complete system of learning that has taken over in the schools today. And all of these issues come under the social emotional learning. Back in the 70s, the school system transitioned from being primarily focused on academics and learning skills and knowledge to transformational education. Transformational education is that the purpose of education is to transform the student. And that happened, that big takeover happened in the 70s. So we've been dealing since that time with students being subjected to values, attitudes, and beliefs all the time. That's what we've been working with all the time since then in the schools. So social emotional learning, this is their definition, is a process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions, and achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible, caring decisions. So one thing that you run up against in all of these education programs is that you have language that is that hides the real agenda. Everything they put in there sounds like a good thing, and it always is that way. You have to pierce the language to understand what it is. So you can see here that there's very little having to do with academic knowledge. They have something, apply knowledge and skills, but it's mostly about attitudes, healthy identities, how to manage their emotions, achieve personal goals. This is like really taking over the whole identity of the student. So SEL is the most recently aggressively marketed education strategy for transforming the attitudes, values, and beliefs of children, and it has very little to do with academics. So the Minnesota Department of Education, where I am from, held its annual Safe and Supportive Schools Conference in 2017, and we monitor the things that go on there. The topic, especially there, was social and emotional learning, and we did not really know what it was back then. And so we wanted to participate and find out what exactly is this. So what we found out from what they presented is to be effective, districts must be saturated with SEL. This includes they have to hire a director, SEL specialists, and training all the district professionals. There's a lot of training. So in this, schools track how students change over time, and they make this tracking data part of a child's permanent school record. It's a huge data collection system. So the Minnesota Department at this conference, they said that SEL instructors will train all teachers in mapping cultural values, which means identifying a student's personal cultural values and preferences in several categories. So this information is collected in a data dashboard and measured to see whether an individual demonstrates changes in regard to attitudes, feelings, and behaviors. The results are entered into a national SEL data bank. So a lot of the training that has been going on over the past few years has been very intense in the schools is how to build these data banks, what systems to use, and they have different names for this system. Everywhere it's a different name, and it actually sounds like there are all kinds of different programs, but it's really the same program. So this is their graphic. This is SEL: self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. This is the whole of SEL. As you can see, it's academic knowledge and teaching is incidental. I mean, they say that all of this helps the student learn. But the truth of the matter is that it's all about transforming the students, and they can learn things along the way that are useful in creating the change that they desire. So CASEL is the organization. It's a nonprofit that is over all of this. It's called the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, and it started in 1994. It implements and advances the social emotional systems in the United States. It has a huge impact also at the federal level. And at all state levels as well. When I'm talking about federal level, I mean government. I mean, even though this is a nonprofit, they have a huge influence on federal legislation. Some of the key funding partners: Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, a group called NOVO, which is fairly new, is dedicated to catalyzing a transformation, this is their language, in global society, moving from a culture of domination to one of equality and partnership. So you get the gist of it. This is the left. So, and now there's Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. All of these are extraordinarily left-wing organizations. They are the partners that are funding CASEL, and they are transforming all of our schools, and it has nothing to do with your local school board. It is funded and driven and training through organization through state agencies all over the country. SEL advances. Okay, now this is their language. I want to read it to you because it's very important to recognize that we're talking here about equity. We're not talking about education. SEL advances educational equity and excellence. Now keep in mind, they always add "and excellent." So of course that sounds so good. Educational equity and excellence everywhere. Through authentic school family community partnerships, authentic school family. Now, so what we're talking about here, SEL is not just for the schools. It's for the community. It is for the whole culture. SEL is intended to be for everybody. Everybody. There's adult SEL. There is all of the teachers have SEL. Okay, so this is a system that takes over the values, attitudes, beliefs of everybody. That means authentic. It's authentic if they adopt the values of SEL. Okay, authentic school, family, community partnerships to establish learning environments and experiences that feature trusting and collaborative relationships. So that, I mean, it's all about relationships. I mean, this is supposed to be education, right? Rigorous and meaningful curriculum. Those are throwaway words. And instruction and ongoing evaluation. Now, ongoing evaluation is key because they're continually evaluating where everybody is, and they're data collecting it, and they're making changes, and they're tracking people's progress. SEL can help address various forms of inequity and empower young people and adults to co-create thriving schools and contribute to safe, healthy, and just communities. So now we're talking activism. This is activism, empowering young people and adults to co-create thriving schools. And, you know, it's all lovely, lovely language, safe, healthy, just communities. But if you've been around the block a little bit, you know that safe and healthy actually means something entirely different than what they want you to believe, than what we actually may think it is. So CASEL will be explicit about how SEL can advance educational equity and excellence. Okay, and excellence. They always add that, and excellence. So I'm going to go to critical race theory because this is where we come in with all the leftist Marxist thinking. CRT holds that institutions, particularly legal institutions in the United States, are inherently racist insofar as they function to create and maintain social, economic, and political inequalities between whites and non-whites. You may be very familiar with critical race theory, and so I apologize if you do. I'm just going to do a quick review that what critical race theory is a it believes that the United States is inherently racist and it has to be changed. It has to be transformed. So it said, this is the definition by Education and sort of the Teachers Union, and as an example of what they call it. So who we are is shaped by our race. Racism is systemic, not a product of individual bias or prejudice, and it is embedded in our policies and legal structures. The focus away from individual people's action and toward how systems uphold racial disparities. So it's about systems. It's not about individual actions or biases. This is about systems. So this is, again, if there's CRT isn't just a class or curriculum, it's a belief system, an approach to teaching in all courses. Racism is at the core, this is their thinking, at the core of America's laws and institutions, that racism is embedded within all our systems and institutions, and the system must be dismantled. So when you have critical race theory, you actually have a lot of different kinds of theories that come out of that, not theories, but different strands. There's queer, which is LBT, gender theory, there's cultural theory, there's feminist theory, and all of this is all part of the whole critical race theory. Now let me go to some of the assumptions of CRT, which we've said a little bit about already. All history is the power struggle between racial groups, the oppressors and the victims. Whatever the dominant group has is taken from the non-dominant group. So there's just one piece of pie and everybody can only have whatever somebody has. They took it from somebody else. That is totally basic Marxism. And it used to be just, the haves and the have-nots, the economic struggle. And what they have done is they've made it they've transformed it into a cultural struggle. So it's not just the haves and have-nots, it's the haves and have-nots. It is it is every individual, every group, every identity group, basically based primarily on race. So people are defined by their identity groups. Individuals are either oppressors or victims, determined by their identity groups. And there you have them. The culture is groups exercising power over each other. So the multiculturalism and diversity never, for example, respect white culture. Multiculturalism, by definition, is opposed to white culture because white culture is dominant, and whatever group is dominant is oppressive. That is the nature and definition of multiculturalism. America is systemically racist, so the system must be dismantled. America is founded on the system of capitalism, which is racist, and therefore America must be disrupted. Another is that there is no absolute truth. There are only competing narratives. Their lived experiences matter more than facts. So facts really are not an issue. Example is the 1619 Project. The 1619 Project is history that is a narrative that doesn't even claim to be factual. It's the narrative that matters, not that there is no such thing as fact. There is whatever the narrative is. So they make up in things, and they don't even deny that. People bear responsibility for and are the beneficiaries of crimes committed by their race. They must atone for their so-called white privilege because, it's a dominant group is an oppressive group, and they have to atone for that because they are of that identity group. So critical race theory has many strands, and equity is the biggest, but there are other strands such as cultural competence, ethnic studies, implicit bias, diversity, equity, and inclusion, anti-racism, which is ironic because it is deeply racist, and intersectionality. Intersectionality is simply all the different identity groups, and it all works as one. It is one systemic oppressive system. So equity, going to equity, is not equality. Equity is critical race theory. Equity is equality is equal opportunity. Equity demands equal outcomes for identity groups. It's very important to recognize that it is about creating equal outcomes for identity groups. All disparities between racial groups and also other identity groups are considered evidence of racism. Equity is Marxism. Examples of equity racial disparities meaning differences in outcomes, that are used as evidence of racism. When you have groups of races or that have this disparity in grades, that's evidence of implicit racism, built-in systemic racism. Different graduation rates, honor rolls, that you have disparities in the number of in the honor rolls. The number of disciplinary actions is another. If you have disparities in the number of disciplinary incidents based on what a racial group you're part of, that is evidence of systemic racism. So, SEL, going back to SEL. SEL is social activism. So this is them again. We know from research that attention to students' holistic learning and development can promote high quality education opportunities and outcomes for all children. And then now they list the different identity groups: race, socioeconomic status, gender, sexual orientation, and other differences. Importantly, SEL has potential to promote the academic, social, and emotional development of all children. This isn't for students who are having a tough time. This is for all students. SEL can also help adults and students co-create more equitable schools and communities. So we are talking about social activism. While SEL alone will not solve the deep-seated inequities in the education system, it can help adults and students build more meaningful relationships and develop knowledge, skills, and mindsets to interrupt inequitable policies and practices, create more inclusive learning environments, and nurture the interests and assets of all individuals. Notice that language they throw in there. Create more inclusive learning environments and nurture the interests and assets of all individuals. That is what education has always been about. It's not like SEL is supposed to bring in something that nobody has ever done anything with. It just blows me away that they can even start saying this thing. We have a whole incredible federal education system called IDEA. It's for the Individual Disabilities Education Act, and it's all focused, and has been for years, on focusing on giving special help to those who need special development help. It's not like this is a brand new thing. By offering opportunities for students to use their voice, examine social problems, and work alongside adults to co-create solutions, SEL can help cultivate change agents. They're making kids into social activists, social justice activists, and leaders who will meaningfully contribute to their communities in the world. By fostering deeper connections and meaningful relationships, SEL can help create a sense of belonging and more inclusive learning environments and communities. Inclusive, basically that means that that the less dominant, the non-dominant culture is elevated to as a victim organization. Inclusive means that they are elevated. And there are all sorts of things that come from that inclusivity, and that includes things like you're supposed to, if you are of the dominant group, you are not allowed to speak first. You are supposed to be quiet if there is one of the non-dominant groups that is participating. It is assuming a guilt for being the dominant, whether it's white or male or heterosexual or Christian. Updated. Okay, so now this is about the way that SEL, this minute has been upgraded by the host. I said note there. All right. The updated SEL language pays attention to personal and social identities. Okay, so what this is that SEL has been around for quite some time, but they have updated their language to, and this is their words here, to personal and social identities, cultural competencies, and collective action. So they're being very explicit, which when they first put this stuff out, nobody could quite figure out what it was. We worked really hard trying to understand it. What is SEL? We knew it was a bad thing, but it was just mumbo jumbo, and it just didn't hang together. But now they are becoming much more explicit. They're talking about, this is all about social identities, cultural competencies, which is another form of CRT, and collective action. It is all about taking collective action to make transformation of our society. It also examines prejudices and biases, skills, knowledge, and mindsets needed to evaluate social norms and systemic inequities and promote community well-being. So what they are saying here is that they are examining your thinking, your attitudes, your values. And I want you to know, when you're talking about values, if you're talking about a West-centered culture, that is a social norm that is oppressive. And if you are a Christian, it is oppressive with the kind of assumptions that go into what life is, what this culture is. CASEL, that's the organization again that is over this, will support schools, districts, and states to infuse SEL systemically, again, throughout the system, into curriculum instruction, out of school time, discipline, student support services, professional learning, ongoing assessment for continuous improvement, and that is where we have to really look at what they're doing. They assess all the time for continuous improvement, meaning judging how well you're moving toward the acceptable values, attitudes, and belief. And it's woven into the daily life of the school, from academic instruction to discipline practices. So here's that CASEL believes that SEL instruction and opportunities are essential to be effective and sound education for all children and youth, regardless of race, socioeconomic status, gender, and other cultural differences. Now, that isn't anything new. That's the way it has been. We've worked for a long time in our culture. But here are some of the recommended resources that they are referencing. ASCD, How to Become an Anti-Racist Educator. Now, if you follow CRT at all, you know that anti-racist means that you are not simply against racism. You are not an anti-racist until you become active and actively oppose the system that is implicitly racist. How to be an anti-racist means how to be a revolutionary. This piece delineates what it means to practice anti-racism and provides actionable strategies for being an anti-racist educator. Okay, this next one, Facing Ourselves, History and Ourselves, has been around for quite a while. It's just extraordinarily leftist. Let's talk about discussing race, racism, and other difficult topics with students. This guide provides strategies that educators can use to facilitate open conversations with students, to talk about the historical roots and contemporary manifestations of social inequality and discrimination. they are making a false assumption here, which they know is false, that none of this is ever discussed. None of this is happening in the schools. And they are going to now talk about race and racism, and it's all going to be through a racial lens, which is the key organizing conflict throughout history, in their opinion. Again, NIAC, that's the National Association for Education of Young Children, NIAC. Becoming upended, teaching and learning about race and racism with young children and their families. So here we have Castle, emerging insights on advancing social and emotional learning as a lever for equity and excellence. So yes, they always have to do that, and excellence. So they are saying this right here. They are using SEL as a lever for equity, which is critical race theory. This Castle report summarizes 5 emerging insights on advancing SEL as a lever for equity and excellence that districts at all stages of their implementation can reflect on as they shape their strategies. So we have here Collaborating States Initiative, CSI, and what this is, a group organized under Castle of about 40 states whose state agencies work together to embed SEL into all aspects of their work. So they're working through state agencies in a very aggressive, powerful way. And so basically, this is an outside group funded by very left-wing organizations who are imposing this on states around the country, and it has never been passed by the federal government. It has never been passed by well, actually, what they do is they get SEL embedded into legislation that goes through, and they have some at the federal level that they're really pushing. Already, there's a great deal of funding for SEL programs that is being done through federal education programs. They've been working at this for a long time. But this isn't anything that has been organized at the federal level. It's not like, it is an outside imposition by these powerful and very, very well-funded internationalist groups that want to transform our country. Transformative SEL is a lever for equity and social justice. This is their stuff. This is not anything that I put together. This form of SEL is aimed at redistributing power to promote social justice through increased engagement in school and civic life. Okay, this is their language. SEL as a lever for equity and social justice. Social justice is another term straight out of critical race theory. Here is more. Core features of transformative SEL include enhancing and foregrounding social and emotional competency needed for civic engagement and social change. I want you to know civic engagement is training how to be an activist. People think that it's the old civics. You learn how to participate in your local government. You learn about the Supreme Court. You learn about separation of powers. And you get engaged in your local legislation, whatever. Civic engagement is the new civics. The new civics is radical training of our young people to be anti-racist, to be social justice warriors, such as reflecting on personal and social identities, examining prejudices and biases, interrogating social norms. Okay, so our social norms in our country under this program are being interrogated, and they are being transformed. It's all about transforming our social norms into theirs. It's disrupting and resisting inequities and co-constructing equitable and just solutions. This is critical race. Yeah, it's revolution. Core features of transformative SEL include prioritizing students' individual and collective agency to take action for social justice. This is not about education. This is not about academics. This is not about skills. This is about creating revolutionaries. So this is the Castle Board of Directors. Quote, "We believe there is no system more important than education to ending racism and dismantling the systems that condone racist acts. We at Castle hold fast to the belief that our work must actively contribute to anti-racism. Remember, that means you have to be an active participant in overthrowing the system, and to all forms of prejudice and reduction, of all forms of prejudice reduction. So here's a little bit more on the data collection. Through evaluations and surveys, they do a lot of evaluations and surveys. And if you go on to a lot of their materials, and there's a lot online that they're out there with all of this. There are all sorts of examples of surveys and evaluations that you can use. And this collects data on the students, and then it evaluates them on an ongoing basis. They have open, suggestive questions. You through these evaluations and surveys, you create an equity lens. You change the way your children view the world through a critical race theory lens. So basically, the data collection is about changing the culture. So Panorama is an organization that does a lot of this work. If you look up their information, and they're just right out there, they have so much information about what they're doing. We cannot keep up with it. I would love to spend nothing more than just finding out more of what they do, but you can only do so much. So Panorama, this is right from their website. They say it pulls your key student information into one spot and gives you visual dashboard reporting. It moves from interpreting data to taking action and improving student outcomes. And student outcomes, of course, is not academics at all. It's the values and attitudes and beliefs of the Marxist system of critical race theory. So here it gives you an example of what student success looks like. We pulled together all of the data. They have all these systems for you that you can use. They're making everything available to schools. Panorama provides a valid and a reliable way to measure and improve social emotional learning in your district. Surveys. Just hold on just a second. I'm going to.
The Philly.
There you go. Sorry about that. So surveys. Use Panorama's vault of research-backed surveys to collect and take action on the information most critical to your district's success. And I want you to know that there's all this surveys that are going on all the time, and parents are usually not allowed to see what they are. And by the way, there is a federal law that makes that illegal, and there are often state laws that do the same. Parents, whenever there are real personal questions that are involved regarding your student, the parent, by federal law, needs to be informed ahead of time and given the opportunity to take remove their child. And that isn't happening. It's happening all over the country that these surveys that are going on. People are unaware that they need to challenge that. That's against federal law. And in Minnesota, it's also against Minnesota law. In the Castle Guide to School-Wide SEL, equity is not a separate focus, but woven throughout the approach to implementation. As you engage in school-wide SEL, we encourage you to continuously center this work around equity. It's all around equity. It's all about race, and it's all about revolution. So this is a little graphic that we think describes it fairly well. SEL, social emotional learning. And from there comes the critical race theory, the comprehensive sex ed, which we can do an awful lot about, the equity, the gender identity, intersectionality. Welcoming classrooms is another, changing of values, beliefs, and mindsets. So that pretty well sums up my presentation here. So I'll be happy to respond to questions.
I'd like to add something. My daughter, we live in Maryland. My daughter is in 7th grade. Today was the first day of school. When she was in 4th grade, at the SEL, they have SEL here in Maryland. She was asked if she thinks that her parents are good parents.
Exactly. That's exactly what they're doing. In fact, the whole thing is focused around parents not knowing. You do not trust your parents, and they'll make very suggestive comments like that. And they'll ask them very personal questions about how do you identify as a sexually, and you can ask children that at that are 8, 9 years old, and if they're confused about what that means, here in Minnesota, we had kids who were told, do not ask your parents. Your parents, you don't want to share this information with your parents. So it's very anti-parent.
In my middle school where my daughter is going, in our neighborhood, there are two sisters. One is 7th, 8th grade now, is the other's, they're 2 years apart. Both of them came home in 6th grade saying they are pansexual or whatever the word is for all that stuff. Now the girl, the younger one, last year in 6th grade, she now identifies as pansexual. She's called X and they as their pronouns. So my daughter then called out the other kids because she didn't know about that and said, no, she's a girl, she's not a boy, and why are you calling her X? Her name is whatever. And then then the other kid snitched on her to the teacher. The teacher contacted the counselor, the school counselor. The school counselor took my daughter out of the classroom to talk to her, and then the school counselor called me at home. And then I basically, talking to her, figured out what girl she was talking about, because that used to be my daughter's friend a couple of years ago. And I said, you should look at the situation in the family about the abuse that is going on, and not empower this kind of behavior.
Right. They are definitely transforming cultural norms, and it's deliberate. And they're indoctrinating the children. The thing is, they have these kids in every single. They say they saturate the school with it. So let me just give you an example that was used in another video, which I think is a good example. And that is, let's say you're studying, you're in a biology class, and you're studying moths, and there's a female moth, and they show you, and then there's a male moth, they'll show you there, and then they'll show you a bisexual moth, which there is no such thing. But they will actually show that, and they will show that as half the coloration is half female and half male. And then they will explain to them that this is a bisexual moth, as if it's a reality. There is no such thing. They are lying to the child. And it's saturating in every single area of the classroom. And I just want you, there's one other thing I did not include in this, and that I should have, and I'm just going to make quick reference to it. When they talk about the whole child, they are also talking about the spiritual side, and they bring in what they call mindfulness. Mindfulness is a Buddhist religion, and they claim that it is not a religion. It is a way of being. And they have exercises that they bring the children through to empty their minds, to open their minds to whatever comes into them. It is a pagan, a religion. And mindfulness is being used in SEL extensively. It is very dangerous. And I didn't say too much about that because you could go into it a long way. But I mean, this is a complete system. And it goes after that. When they say authentic relationships, think about that your authentic relationship with you as a mother. I mean, here you have your child is saying things that are absolutely true, and they come back at you. And isn't this great? Authentic relationships. What they are doing is they are controlling families, and they're controlling communities, and they're controlling political systems. It's really advanced. I have to tell you, it's very advanced. And people don't know.
I agree with you. My gosh, and I'm hoping that for this is the time that we're coming. Thank you for this kind of awakening. This is the time for reevaluation of all the old systems, and that we're all involved in creating the new ones. It's just amazing. So it's this is the right time to be giving this kind of. Hopefully, can be a lot. Well, we'll be posting this, and everybody will be able to see this because it is such an important time to be revealing this. And so, do we have other questions here on the? Anybody else? Any questions for her?
I have one question. What is the primary reason as to why these people were able to get such a stronghold in the schools? Is it money? Is it that the schools don't have money for the programs and these people are coming with bundles and bundles of money? What's the deal?
Well, that's an interesting question. It should be illegal for outside foundations to be determining what's happening in our schools, but it's not, and it's been going on for a long time. So schools will accept money, and I mean, they don't always just accept the money. What Castle does is it puts together the entire system, and it does the training, it does the promotion. It hires people to go and sell these ideas to people who already believe in transformational education. So transformational education has been around for quite a few decades now. And so this is really just the most recent evidence of it. And so it's not that the schools necessarily get direct grants, although many times they do get direct grants. But if you look at, like, for example, the panorama that I made reference to, that is just this massive organization. It's an outside organization, but it provides all of the resources, all of the training, all of the everything. They have these conferences, and they bring in all these really, if you have unlimited money to spend, you can make a huge impact on the school system when it is already committed to transformational education, which they have been since the 70s. And that came in through, Stalinism. A Stalinist named Gramsci from the 1930s. I mean, that was his whole thing, was transformational education, because he figured that was the way to make revolution. And it got picked up. Antonio Gramsci was the guru for Bill Clinton. He was like, it came into American leftist ideology back in the 60s and 70s. It was a big deal. And that's what it is. It is a Marxist system, and SEL is it's a system that is actually just putting it into practice. And I would say, get your kids out. Just get them out.
One more question. The data that is collected through the SEL or the Castle systems, how is that used on the individual or against the individual later in life? Is this part of the social evaluation that we're going to do?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Could you try that again?
Okay, so you said that they collect data in the SEL. Yes. They collect all kinds of data, behavior, patterns, all that stuff. How is that used? How is that data used against the individual in the future?
I'll tell you how I believe that it's used, and I don't have any personal experience with that. But I mean, if you delve into it further, I know you can find out how it is. But this is what they have on record, like your answers to surveys, for example. So the students who need to be brought along with regard to race. If you think that racism is something that people are responsible for themselves, then you don't understand it. So you've got somebody who needs extra work in that area, and you bring them around. I mean, this is a deliberate effort to transform the thinking of the students. And right now, when we're putting critical race theory into the schools aggressively, they're being explicit about that without even talking about SEL. Right now, for example, in a school district right next to where I am, they just instituted a new policy called, to put a racial lens on everything they do. Every policy, every curriculum, every training is a racial lens. Okay, so they're very explicit about what they're doing about that now. When you figure out, okay, now you've got SEL, here's how you can make sure that it is being that your students are actually traveling along the road they want you to travel on. I mean, this is Maoism.
Also, I had a question to read that from the chat. Can you read that, Marta?
Was that a question?
The question?
Yes, that's in the chat.
Okay. To Julie, can you explain the person and the book where they got CRT and 1916 project along with the year and college?
Could I explain the book, 1619 project?
The person and book where they got the CRT and the 1916 project along with the year and the college.
Okay, it's the 1619 project. The 1619 project came out of the New York Times, and it was I don't remember the name of the author, but it's a woman who makes the claim that the United States was founded in 1619 by slavery, and that is the foundation of America. So it's a rewriting of American history based on nothing that can be corroborated. The history is made up, and yet it is accepted. When she was criticized, when it first came out, which was now a couple of years ago only, when it first came out, she is subject to a lot of criticism because they said, there's no evidence of what you're saying here. And this isn't, there's no evidence of that. What are you talking about? And she responded by saying, I'm not saying everything in here is accurate. I'm saying that the narrative is true. And so it isn't that it is being picked up. This false history is being used in many, many school districts in our country. And it is fake. They never even claim that it's all true. The whole point is that it is telling the story of oppression. And that's all that they care about. And that story to them is true.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay. What begs the question, are they trying to make it true? Of course. That's the easy one. Thank you. Any other questions?
I just wanted to make a comment. There is a huge organization in Houston, Texas, and they have a whole lot of money, and they are actually funding these projects. I have seen the information on them, and I do have some videos. If someone would like for me to share them, I can. Like, of course, it's very surreal, and it's like they've been putting around these and we just didn't know.
So on the education chat, that would be great for other people to see that, I'm sure.
Okay, happy.
Yeah, and so I know that we've seen that hopefully we've disconnected from what was the Azure system and all these kinds of quantum level computing systems that were going to just know everything about us and be able to control us through our little thing. That's what's inside of us. So yeah, we have to realize we just we were just the edge of things, and there's probably a whole system that's been put in place that's ready to go. And this is what we're up against now. I think the head of the snake is off, but we have to now we're up against everybody was ready to go with this new thing they were rolling out. So, what do you guys think about that? Nothing.
Yes, we do have the solutions, and this was not a presentation to be negative, just a presentation to be present, because we are shifting out of 3D into other dimensions, but until we do, we need to know what to do, how to do it, and change that negative into a positive. Someone mentioned this morning about whatever you don't want, put it in a black hole. Well, yep, we can do that. But we do need to concentrate on what's going on at hand and get some solutions. We are the first defense of these children. And yes, it is a big call to get out now. It is. But they also need to have somewhere to go. So, we're going to continue to, imagine and decree and declare and put together what we want to see for our children of this whole world, so that we can, somehow get out in a better way out of this whole thing and get out in a safe way that allows them to talk.
I just wanted to mention that in Minnesota right now, we're going through this incredible revolution in a sense. Parents are pulling their kids out, and they are working together to try to put together some sort of cooperative efforts to teach their children. And it's amazing. I've never seen anything like it, because it's just bigger than anybody, any individual group or person, and they're just scrambling. They're like, for example, homeschool co-ops where parents have to work during the day, so they can find somebody who can watch the kids during the day, and then on the weekend they can teach them what they need to teach them. Anything to get them out. Some are starting what are called micro schools, where they'll hire a teacher, and that teacher will be teaching some neighborhood kids, as many as that person. And it's kind of like the old one-room school, where you've got a certified teacher who will teach the children and have them. The public school spends hours doing things that they do not need to do. So it's to me, it's just amazing what people are doing to help each other to get their kids out and to be actually educated, because they're not being educated in the schools, and the results are just on a downward spiral. Kids aren't learning to read. Kids aren't learning to do math, and it's just outrageous.
Is money following the kids now or no?
What was that?
Is money following the kids?
Oh, yeah. So that's a big deal. If they take them out by a certain date, before a certain date, that school loses the money for the students. So there's this game going on where they're trying to keep them in long enough so that they get the money, even if the kid leaves. So yeah, money is a big deal. And the other thing is happening is that the school board members are just are being inundated so much that a lot of them just are not running again. They're dropping out because they're faced with these masses of people who are angry and are demanding things and being ignored. The parents are being absolutely ignored. And so you have, people now for the first time in a long time interested in saying, I'm going to run for that school board position. And people are dropping off of the school board position because they can't handle the crowd. So, I don't think Minnesota is the only place this is happening, but it is happening in a big way right now here.
That's exciting. Life Force members should just join boards of education all across the world. We could, in a blink of an eye, it could be transformed.
That's right.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
People have to understand how bad it is before that happens.
Mm-hmm. And Julie, I have a question. What about Ron Paul homeschooling program? That seems like a classic education program, and it's not expensive at all.
I'm not really familiar with it. It's probably terrific. I don't know. There are a lot of good programs out there.
Yeah.
There really are. Yeah.
It seems like it would be a pretty relatively easy solution for all these families who are conscious of what's going on, and they use one curriculum and, go to different, I don't know, VFW halls, I don't know, wherever communities can gather. It's exciting.
Yeah, but people have to get together and start organizing. They can't do it alone.
You did such an amazing job. Thank you again.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Frightening.
Yes, we did. Thank you, Julie. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. If Winfred, would you like to make some closing remarks about today's, or also Julie?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Julie. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Again, we just want to thank you for coming and for sharing again. There's a whole lot of information that you have given, and I know you have a whole lot more. I apologize for the short amount of time that you did have, but you were just awesome. This is being recorded so that others will be able to hear and be able to share as well. We are going into a big transformation, and I always say something has to end for something to begin. So this is where our organization, Life Force Education, is actually going to begin. And so, to all the teachers, their professionals, whoever else, hey, we got space one right here, right, Norma? we got a lot of space right here. So, we just needed to know some of this information, and we do appreciate Julie again for coming on. And with that, I knew.
Thank you. And Julie, thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for being here.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.